people.
It's a good 5-mile trip to put my boat in at Bayfront Park and get fishing out where the fish are, salmon, etc., out of off of 50 Point. The greenhouses for lake trout. If the guys know fishing, that's where it is. It's a good 5-mile drive to put my boat in and cut across the harbor, out the canal, and then head either way, Toronto or fish down that Port Dalhousie way. That's where most of the fish are going. That's where the anglers go. So I've done a lot of boat trips in up north, etc., and fly-ins, etc. 12-mile boat ride's not fun, but to get across from my boat and get out into the lake, it's not half a tank of gas.
Great, thanks for that.
That's the closest. LaSalle Park, it's a free launch. It's the same amount of distance to get out to Lake Ontario. I remember Burlington used to have one at the Brant Inn. If anybody knows the Brant Inn, there used to be a canoe launch there and everything. Oh, that was free. There's nothing there now. There's nothing between Hamilton and Burlington on the Lake Ontario side.
Thanks for that, George. That's the only questions I have, Mr. Chairman, but I do have comments to make after you excuse George.
Okay. Any other questions from any other committee members? Hearing none, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Yeah, and if I could, just again to reiterate thanks to George and Dave and their group, and Stucco, their angling club, as well as DeFasco's, I know, are active participants with the Hamilton Waterfront Trust's annual fishing derby. Many of their members assist with lining hundreds and hundreds of reels, and then they're there on the day of, helping the kids with everything that goes on with the fishing derby. So I want to thank their group for their past participation there. They've been great ambassadors for the waterfront and for the city. Having said that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, as you know, 50 Point is managed by the Hamilton Conservation Authority, and we do have a couple of members on the Public Works Committee here. Councillor Connolly, I believe, is on the Conservation Authority, as is Councillor Pursuta, as am I, and I think we can receive the presentation here today, and possibly the members, including those that aren't on the committee, can meet with the group representatives as well as Mr. Christopher Thiegelin and possibly our acting chairman, Mr. Howlett, to discuss opportunities. I'm not sure what opportunities exist at 50 Point. It's certainly a revenue issue for the Conservation Authority, but it is managed by our local CA. So if I could, Mr. Chairman, that we receive this report, it be forwarded to the Conservation Authority for their information, and I would commit to, as an aside, arranging a meeting with the group and those representatives. And to be clear, we've made a lot of investments in the West Harbour area and in other areas as well around Hamilton Harbour, and many of those improvements, not just on the land, but certainly in the water as well. And we know that when Randall Reef is completed a couple of years from now, we'll finally be in a position to delist the harbour. I know that urban angling, just over the last decade, is making a very aggressive comeback. As George said, many have continued to use the harbour, even during times when we've been affected severely by pollution in and out of the water. But urban angling in general, I think, in the Hamilton area, the greater Hamilton area, is coming back. We see that if you're around Pier 7 and Pier 8, on any day of the week. You go down there today, you'll probably find a number of people around the harbour area. And in the east, and certainly for those of us who are familiar, we have an amazing carp population, some of the largest ones you'll find in southern Ontario and in Canada. And we have a number of clubs that are utilizing not just Eastport area, but there's an area just before Windermere where every day of the week you'll find somebody fishing there. So all of that is certainly a good thing, and we've made strategic investments to make that happen with other partners. But as the club has noted, there's still this deficiency as it relates to access to the lake. Great access to the harbour, but for anyone who has certainly a smaller vessel even, who's looking to get out onto the lake, there's a cost associated with that. And that cost in comparison to other municipalities is quite large when you start looking at some of the other figures in other municipalities. So I'd be happy to move, proceed to the report, Mr. Chairman, and I would certainly commit to setting up that meeting.
So moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Pursuta. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, sir. Now, moving on, we have 6.2, and on this particular issue, I guess this is an initiative in flux, and there's been some changes. So as a result, it needs to be tabled as a direct result of a request from staff. So, Councillor Collins?
Yeah, I would move to table it until the next meeting, Mr. Chairman, or indefinite.
Madam Clerk?
May 1st, next meeting.
2 meetings from now?
First.
All right, I'll move for 2 meetings from now.
That's moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. Yes, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies, but I know that there are residents here on this particular item. Were they advised that this was going to be tabled?
They were this morning. Apparently, we received an email just this morning regarding this particular issue, and they were advised accordingly.
One residents from my ward, that's why I just was wondering.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
So moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Moving on. On 7.1. Now I have a presentation from Steve Barnhart, Manager of Environmental Services. Steve, could you please come forward?
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm here today to provide an update on the Emerald Ash Borer program. As part of the direction by Council when the funding was approved back in 2012, staff committed to come back each year with an update on the progress. So I've got a few slides just to talk about where we're at and where we're going. For those new to this issue, the Emerald Ash Borer program has been an issue in Canada since 2002. It's essentially an insect that is targeting ash trees across the city. Essentially, the larvae are girdling the tree beneath the bark, so it's not really evident unless sampling is taken at the time, but as the tree starts to decline, it does decline quickly. It is extremely aggressive and anticipated to essentially attack every ash tree in the city. It was first found in Hamilton in 2009. The trees, once they start to show decline, it takes a couple of years when the insect begins girdling the tree for it to actually decline rapidly. It's evident by several different indicators. Often there are tiny holes in the bark that can be seen. The tree itself will, as the picture here on the left, talk a little bit about the amount of leaf out. It starts to show decline as the canopy gets smaller and smaller. The middle picture references the small branches or epicormic shoots that start to they shoot out from the trunk of the tree. It's an indication. And essentially, as the tree gets into further states of decline, woodpeckers can find the tree and start to target the bark, and you'll see areas of the bark that go white. That's sort of toward the final end of the tree's decline process. So the program I referenced at the beginning is a 10-year management plan. It's council approved $2.6 million annually over the 10 years. And as part of that program, the strategy would be to remove 10% of the inventoried ash trees each year. That number is approximately 2,300 trees. As part of that program, we will reintroduce a more diverse species list to replace those trees that are coming out and try to get them as close to the physical location as where the removal has occurred. It's a real opportunity for the city to spread the diversity across by introducing a lot more different species to avoid problems that we've had in the past, such as Dutch elm disease, or as we're experiencing now with the ash borer. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is the primary body for regulating the emerald ash borer issue for pests, and they do track areas of what they're referring to as a quarantine zone. So you can sort of see the change in the mapping. The yellow areas basically restrict the movement of ash tree wood, whether it be used for firewood or other purposes, to within the zone. So I know we have been receiving questions about, is it okay if a neighbor picks up wood from a contractor or used for other purposes? As long as the wood has stayed within the quarantine area, that's the concern from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I think that the takeaway from this map, though, is the quarantine zone has more than doubled. It's as far north as Sudbury, and what doesn't show on the map is there's almost 26 states now in the U.S. that have the emerald ash borer infestation. This slide talks a little bit about the milestones of the process. So prior to conducting a removal, our staff are out monitoring to see the state of the ash tree, and we generate lists that are given to a contractor. The contractor will then review those locations and provide a notice to the resident, wherever that property is, usually about 7 days in advance, that the tree will be removed. The removal process stops at what you see in with the stump picture. So that work we can do without doing locates. Prior to grinding out the stump, we have to call for utility locates. So there is a bit of a lead time between that and when the company gets out to do the markings for us, and then our contractor will go back in and, as you can see in the bottom picture there, grind out the stump sorry. We try to remove as much stump material as possible below grade, so somewhere between 15 and 30 centimeters, so we don't encourage any suckering coming up, and then the area is seeded over, soil and seed is provided. Obviously, the stump work can occur throughout the year, although in extreme weather conditions like we experienced this winter, we are delayed in getting back in to actually find the stumps once they're covered in snow. We also have to work around the wet conditions that we experience in the spring and parks, so not to damage the turf. So there will be always a delay getting back to those sites to get those stumps from a tough winter season. The stumping process runs fairly smoothly once we get back into good weather. We've got just approximately 1,000 locations that will be completed by the end of June 30th. This map is basically the distribution of ash trees, where you can see the work that has been going on across the city. The areas of highest concentration of ash are really on the mountain and in Ward 10. And then the darker dot, the red dot, shows the injection sites where we've made attempts to preserve the trees. The final verdict on our success of the program, it was a 2-year injection cycle, meaning that the product we used is not injected annually. We'll be going out very shortly now that the leaves are coming out, and we'll be able to have a better indication of what trees will qualify for re-injection. This graph shows a little bit of a couple of things here. It shows that the big red spike, the dotted line, was the study that was conducted back in 2010 to look at the projected mortality, and this was based on evidence across other areas in the U.S. So at the time, it was not seen to be a linear decline, but that the infestation would gradually grow to a point where it starts to almost build like an exponential curve. So you can see that curve is really starting now, and anticipated to spike around 2017. And then as the large majority of ash trees have basically died, the pest will start to decline, and just be less trees for them to feed off of. As I mentioned at the beginning, the mortality is projected to be about 98%, so essentially all the ash trees are anticipated for failure. The black line in the middle is our target for removals. That was the council-approved program. So it's essentially equal amount, as I mentioned, 2,300 trees each year. And then the two bars that are showing our removals and our planting as we move along. So the program started in the middle of 2013 once we issued our contract for a multi-year removal process. We had delays basically due to the ice storm, where we had to put all hands on deck to address that. We've since picked up a lot of ground in 2014 to get our targets back on track, and we are projecting probably into 2015 to have to be right on our removal program. The plantings to date is the green line, similar to, as I mentioned, the ice storm. We started the planting process later in 2013. We've been picking up a lot of ground in 2014, and we'll be back at that 1-to-1 target by the end of 2015. So these are some of the numbers. To date, 6,761 trees have been removed. As I mentioned, the stumps are following close behind, with the balance of them being cleaned up by June the 30th. And to date, 1,946 trees have been planted. Our nursery is full of trees right now, and the contractors have already started going out into the field. So planting has begun, and will run right through until freeze up this year. Here's a picture of sort of the process. I mean, we are bringing in quite a range of species. The trees are inventoried in our yard. We can't bring in the full order all at once, but we do try to be strategic about a mix of species as well as the quantities. As orders have been accumulating in the fall, they're the first ones that we address in the spring going forward. The crews deal with the contractors when they come in. Then the contractors are notified where the trees will be planted, and then you can see on the far image there for the locations that are not in front of residences, we'll use a gator bag, which is essentially a porous bag that's filled with water and then refilled each week to allow the tree to be maintained. For trees in front of residential properties, we are really encouraging the residents to be part of this process, and we engage them at the beginning by talking about the species options for the replacement tree, talking about the importance of watering, and then asking the resident to maintain that tree on a regular watering interval. This is just to show a few examples of trees. As I mentioned, there's 90 different species that we purchase. The trees are chosen for their size. Obviously, each location will have its unique features, whether it's a smaller boulevard with overhead hydro, or whether it's a park that is very open. It really dictates what sort of species we can put in there. And then, of course, we want to be selective when we're looking at a location to make sure that we're not overly concentrating too many of the individual species so that we end up with a street full of one type of tree, which is exactly the issue we're trying to avoid because of the ash program. Our species diversity is it's not all native trees. About 65% are native or native hybrid cultivars, and then the 35% are non-native. These images just give you an example of some trees are chosen for their form, as I mentioned, or their flowering qualities. Others are quite stately in size. We do maintain a community education and awareness program. I've already had the opportunity to work with some members of council on developing newsletters to go out to residents. We can tailor that specifically to the ward and the plan of attack for that ward. We do ads in the paper. We have a door knocker program where we actually talk about the emerald ash borer. And there's a booklet that we've used, which is available in the recreation centers as well. So the communication program is adaptable each year, and certainly by all means, if you've got specific requests, you want me to work with you on anything, we can customize that to suit your needs. I think now we're entering the third year of the program. There has been, as I mentioned, a lot of removals. I believe it's becoming more in the forefront of many people's minds. So again, just to summarize, we want to maintain council's targets of proactive management program, 2,300 removals each year. By the end of this year, we'll have brought our replacements in line with that target, so we will be planting just over 3,700 trees this year, and with the objective of really diversifying our forests through this replacement. So it's a real opportunity to set us up for success in the future and a best chance of resistance to another infestation that may come down the road. The funding that we had for 2015 has kept us just at our target, but that's essentially where it will stop. We anticipate, as I mentioned in the beginning, with that mortality projection curve, that 2016 will be asking for the full amount of funding because what we've seen to date certainly is in line with that curve. It's not understated. We anticipate that the increase will happen at the end of this year and into next year. That's the overview of the program. As I mentioned, we're just starting to look at planting now, and certainly we will be going out as leaf out has just begun to see exactly where we're at with that mortality curve.
Thank you, sir. We do have a list of speakers. We have Councillor Collins, Jackson, Whitehead, and Pearson. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Steve, I understand that obviously other Ontario municipalities are dealing with the same issue. How does our program compare to others? So I know that when we first contemplated the schedule that you had in front of us here, there were other municipalities that were taking a different route, and some of them were taking a wait-and-see approach to the EAB issue. Are we one of the more aggressive municipalities now, or is this the norm in terms of what others have adopted either ahead of us or behind us? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, through the chair. There is a range of opportunities. I do have a summary here, but essentially we are doing proactive management was one of the recommendations. Some municipalities are doing wait and see and deal with the removal only. Some are being very aggressive in the injection program. Oakville, as an example, injected 6,000 trees, although they've experienced the last numbers were 1,500 of those trees that had to be removed. So that is a very expensive program. So there is a range of opportunities. Toronto is doing a fairly extensive removal program. So I guess in summary, we've chosen a financially affordable plan. We are managing against that target.
Thanks, Steve. Can I ask as well, we have another tree planting program in place that offers residents a tree on the front lawn, separate and apart from the EAB issue. So are we at 5,000 trees a year we're planting? I know Mike McNamara in 213 gave us an update on that program, and we were ramping up those plantings, again, separate from what we're planting here. Where do we sit with that now in terms of trying to increase the number of trees within the urban area?
Through the chair, we, since I believe it was 2009, have been increasing the number of the free street tree in the city. So last year we were just over 6,000 trees under that program. We have also been increasing the number of trees that we've been ordering to address both. So this year we've purchased approximately 8,200 trees, but that is for both the replacement of ash trees and the street tree planting program. So we are running, I would say, at a maximum capacity under the current model of bringing trees in under the nursery to get the best affordable pricing, and then organizing contractors through an annual tree planting contract to get those trees in the ground.
Is it 8,200, sorry, Steve?
8,200 was the
for this
purchase
year.
for this
and
year.
And we anticipate planting all of those by year end?
That is correct, yes, through the chair.
We've focused, through you, Mr. Chairman, much of our attention on the residential areas. Certainly lots of calls, and everyone who was knocking on doors during the election, it was one of those issues that just consistently, was coming up. So lots of questions from residents, and then service calls as well, following up on some of those inquiries. But lost in all of this, I think, is the city's parks and open spaces. How are we faring in those areas where we have an inventory of ash trees? And I know that I've worked with certainly the school board, and it was covered last year in the paper. We removed 80 trees from one school property alone. So for parks, open spaces, those areas, are they included in the numbers that you provided here, or are these the residential numbers in total? Right.
So through the chair, yes, this is the total numbers. We have also been conducting removals and replacements in the parks and cemeteries. So the program addresses the street tree, addresses the park tree and the cemetery tree. Open spaces have been addressed through a removal if there is a risk to private property damage. So if there are standing dead trees in our open space areas adjacent to a residential property, we will go in and evaluate those trees for risk of whether they need removals. But the tree planting program essentially is focusing on the residential streets, the parks, and the cemeteries.
Great. Last question I have through you, Mr. Chairman, is with the replacements that I referenced earlier, as I understand it, the school board's not eligible to receive trees that they lose on their own property, although they're a public entity, they're not a private landowner. And I know we have the one-to-one. If a resident loses a tree on their property, we'll certainly come back and replace one. Are the replacement trees, are they eligible, is the school board, eligible for replacement trees if they're losing one or more trees on their property?
May have to defer to Craig on that. I mean, the program, if there are road allowance trees, certainly in front of the schools, we treat those no differently than any other municipal street, but I'm not aware of anything specific for.
And I ask it in the context of it's essentially, as most schools are, their green space is a city park for most people, and to lose 80 trees on one site, there's a big change in terms of what that property looks like now. It was essentially a woodlot before, and so I know the residents in the area are anxious to see some of that shade come back and some of the trees come back. I was going to actually bring a motion to committee at some point in time, but good time with your presentation here today. So, Craig, I don't know if there's opportunities for a partnership with the school board to assist them in trying to replant, and I know their resources are almost just as thin as ours.
Craig?
Through the chair, we can look at that. Presently, they are considered private property. They tax separate from the city of Hamilton, and we didn't resource that way when we came up with the model. But we can look at that because we do have instances, as you're aware, where a resident doesn't want a replacement tree. So maybe we can look at school board property as homes for those replacement trees.
Great, thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collins. We now have Councillor Whitehead, and following Pearson and Conley. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I guess the first question I have, Steve, is many of the trees are being cut down, and I know that I have one person on my Uncle Taviano who went out and grabbed a lot of the logs that, as a result of the ash trees being cut down, and brought it to his yard and cut them up and got them stacked on both sides of his house. But the real question, and this one was posed by a neighbor, is what regulations are we putting in place to ensure that all that cut wood that we're taking down that's contaminated with the ash borer is restricted only into this community, or can be exported to cottage country? Like, what restrictions are we putting on the movement of these dead trees?
So through the chair, the quarantine area established by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is quite large, so that is really the sole restriction. The wood has to remain within that quarantine area. I mean, wood removed as part of our program technically is protected under our forestry public tree bylaw. The wood is to be addressed by the municipality, but there is no specific concern from the spread of the ash borer by moving wood within that quarantine area established by the inspection agency. I hope that answers.
So I guess my question clearly is, my neighbor has no idea what the regs are. He went and picked up logs and cut them up at night that we left on the roadside. If he had a cottage in the Muskokas or beyond that quarantine area, how in the heck would he even know that he couldn't bring that wood up in the trailer to supply his cottage?
So through the chair, I mean, we can specifically mention that as part of our communication program if that issue is occurring. As I mentioned, the wood is restricted to quite a large area. It's almost as far as Sudbury, but yes, if somebody was to travel outside of that zone, they can, under the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, be in violation.
So I guess the question really is, then, what are we doing to educate, to ensure that we're doing our part to inform those that are picking up our wood and utilizing it for their own needs? And, you know, it could be up in Killarney, which is outside of that zone. A lot of cottages and people live and live here in Hamilton and travel up there, or North Bay. So the question is, if they're outside that quarantine area and they're taking wood up there, they have no means of knowing and understanding without us providing that information to them. So can I ask if we could put a strategy together and make sure that we're informing people that are picking up wood that it could be utilized in the quarantined area, but not outside the quarantine area?
Yep, no, through the chair, we can definitely address that this year as part of our communications.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Steve, for the presentation. Steve, are we suing the airline that allowed this beetle bug to come over from Asia? I'm being very facetious. Okay. So, Steve, so that we don't allow history to repeat itself, just to rewind the tape, I understand the emerald ash tree is a very hardy tree, the limited amount of knowledge I have on forestry, but learning and talking to certain people in forestry. So I guess there was a mass planting of the emerald ash in Hamilton because they were a hardy tree or a good-looking tree. Mr. Chairman, just through you to Steve to understand the past, please.
Yes, through the chair. I mean, the ash has a lot of attributes. It does well in an urban setting. It grows fairly fast. It has a nice form. It's an aesthetically not a bad-looking tree. So all these things would have drove designers of the day and planning of the day to look at something that meets the needs of that street aesthetic. You know, as through even my own training. Historically, you know, large plantings of a similar species look aesthetically pleasing because it makes a large statement. I think we've learned over the decades that there's a gamble, and the Dutch elm disease is a prime example of that, where cities out west lost a beautiful street canopy, and that elm was chosen for its form, for its ability to create that certain aesthetic. I guess we've learned from that historically and are taking plans this year forward to diversify and not repeat those mistakes.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's important to know as moving forward. I think at the time we embarked on this with your predecessor, Councillor Collins, and I put an amendment where we were saying where you don't necessarily, if the homeowner loves that tree, even though you're in the neighborhood, and that tree is marginal in terms of infestation and possibly still has a few years left, that your staff would allow some leeway, especially where the homeowner was very protective of the tree and didn't want to lose the canopy of the tree, the shade, etc. Mr. Chairman, through you to Steve, is that still occurring through your staff, please?
Yes, through the chair, the tree does go through stages of decline that are visual to us. We try to be strategic, so we are looking at areas at a larger scale, at a grid scale. When we will go through these areas on a regular basis. The areas of the highest concentration are taking more of our time, obviously, but we keep revisiting these each year. So it's not until the tree is really posing a risk for us. We don't want to have a standing dead tree that becomes problematic for the actual removal process. We also, if we're in an area where, and I use an example of a street where there's 8 or 10 that are essentially at that final stage of decline, and there's one that is at a moderate stage of decline, we'd like to be efficient and not have to come back to deal with one tree that we know is going to be dead within another 12 months. So we do work with residents. We do have a bit of latitude there.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that latitude. And lastly, Steve, you know I've chatted with you, met with you on a couple of sites where the emerald ash borer has been on private property, the backyards and that, and some homeowners are just bewildered in terms of what's confronting them. Are we at least, is the city even like possibly through a waiver offering to help on that person's backyard, that homeowner's backyard, where it's been demonstrated evidence there's the emerald ash borer tree and obviously infested, needs to come down? Are we providing advice, guidance? Are we getting into waivers where at least we can help homeowners? Because I've got a number of frustrated homeowners that obviously are very much in tune with this issue. Mr. Chairman, through you to Steve, please.
Yes, through the chair. I know last year, Councillor Jackson, there was a request that you made for staff to go back and look at options, and one of the suggestions was to extend the city's rate to private homeowners. So that was explored with the previous manager, and the contractor was open to that dialogue. The contractor would simply deal directly with the private homeowner, with the understanding that they are obviously performing a large service for the municipality. We can update that discussion with the contractor this year as well to make sure they're still on tune for that arrangement.
That's marvelous, Steve. I really appreciate that sensitivity. Mr. Chairman, our staff must be carrying, at least I'll speak for my area, they must be carrying it out in a very prudent, responsible, but caring way, in that if there was a large swath along a street in my ward that was just being devastated and removed, I would have had many calls and emails, but I think our staff are handling it to the best of their ability. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Pearson. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Steve, for the information. And as you mentioned earlier, our Ward 10 has the largest number of trees, and they've been coming down pretty efficiently, and I appreciate that, taking the concerns of the neighborhoods into consideration. I did have a question, though, with regards to the replacement of the trees, and I notice here that we're saying on slide 13, you're increasing the ash tree replacements to 3,777. Is that this year? I'm just concerned because I think in the article that was in the Spectator, and I know I've received some concerns that we're not replacing every tree that comes down. We're basically 1 to 3 now. Is that correct? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Steve?
So through the chair, no, our mandate is at 1 to 1. So the numbers shown here are we've purchased for that 1 to 1 replacement, and it's to catch up. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did assume ground because of the ice storm and setbacks. So, and the tree planting process obviously comes after the removal process. certainly we will, by the end of the year, be back on our targets where they need to be at the one-to-one replacement.
Wonderful, thank you, and I know the residents will be appreciative of hearing that. So I also thank you for the comments with regards to the type of trees, because I know residents in Ward 10 have raised concerns as to why we allow developers and builders to put in cheap trees, so to speak, and they weren't cheap trees. They're actually very strong and healthy trees. It was the bug that came in that unfortunately we had no control over. So I've tried to educate the public and letting them understand that. And as a person myself who knows, I had 11 ash trees, private property. One's down, and I'll tell you, as Councillor Jackson's raised, it's not cheap to have these trees removed. The tree that I had removed last year is a 70-foot ash tree, and it was about $1,000 to come down, cut and block the wood, and to grind the stump. So I can understand where residents are very concerned, so I appreciate that. The last question I do have, Mr. Chairman, through you to Steve, is when we replace the plantings of trees, because this goes hand in hand with some of the issues I'm having in Ward 10, where I'm having sidewalks heaving because of trees, because they were planted in narrow boulevards. Are we being proactive in evaluating when we plant the new trees? Because I'm seeing some of them go into very narrow boulevards again, and it's great for now, I appreciate it, but give a couple of years from now, I'm going to have the sidewalk heaving and the cracked slabs again. So through you, Mr. Chairman, can I ask Steve, how are we addressing that?
So through the chair, I mean, the review process for the replacement has a few people involved, arborists, both on the contractor side and our own staff, to look at the appropriate tree for the appropriate location. We do look for specific issues like that. If the median is too narrow, it's not a guarantee that we can get a tree back in every location, because one thing that I didn't mention with the grinding of the stump is only removing the material down to below the surface so we can restore the lawn. We can't physically plant in that location. The root mass is, especially if it was a very large tree, is significant. So we will try and plant as close to that location as possible. There is a separate program. We work closely with operations. If sidewalks become an issue, we will address that through roots. We try and be proactive in looking at where the tree is at in its maturity cycle as well, to be proactive in those areas.
Excellent. Thank you. And lastly, I just want to mention, I appreciate Councillor Collins raising the issue with schools. So the school board is aware of the situation, how they need to address ash trees on their own property. I'm just surprised. I was at a school on Friday, Catholic elementary school, 8 absolutely dead ash trees down their side yard. Number one, the principal or the teacher that took me out to see another issue was not aware of the situation, was not aware that they were ash, and these trees were totally dead, and I did explain to them that they need to address them sooner than later. So I appreciate that we get some education out to the schools, or to the board at least, that they know, both public and separate school boards. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy or Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Connolly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A lot of the questions have sort of been answered, but replacement of trees. So the trees that are cut down this year, I've had 5 or 6 residents call me, they will be replaced this year. And just to add on to that, you're replacing them now to the end of November or October, whenever you can. Is that true? Is that a true statement?
Yes, through the chair. So we have forecast this year's removals as well. The ones that are going to be replaced first are from last year. We're going through the list. We're trying to take into consideration some conditions such as the parks, which haven't totally dried out yet, may be delayed a little bit before we can replant. But the 3,700 replacements will replace all the removals that have occurred to date, plus the anticipated removals for the balance of the year.
Okay, and can you go through being a new councillor and all that stuff? Maybe you went through this last year, but the procedure to decide whether to keep a tree or to remove the tree. How does that work? Because I know you've said to me that there's a couple of trees in my area that you think you can save. So there must be a procedure you go through to test them. Is that a fair statement?
So through the chair, yes, and the councillor refers to the injection program. We do look at, I'm going to use the term trees of distinction, or a larger tree that is not showing significant decline. These trees, and we certainly encourage any of the councillors to bring those locations forward, would be eligible for injection. And essentially what we're doing, though, is we're prolonging the onset of the ash borer. So it's a program that has to occur regularly. It's not something that is a one-time injection. The thinking is that as the majority of mortality occurs across the city, the ash borer population will decline and essentially pass us by. But there's no guarantees that will happen. I mean, the injection program has to continue as long as there is an emerald ash borer present. Trees, like you see in the image here on the left, are in their final states of decline. Certainly if a tree is showing signs of maybe a third dieback in the canopy, we won't necessarily address it right away, but it's just a matter of time until that tree has to come down.
Thank you. And so we cut this tree down, it's got the larvae in it, right? And we're trying, does that larvae die because the tree is not feeding any nutrients? But what's happening there?
Through the chair, so the borer does have 4 stages of its life cycle. It can lie in sort of the pupa stage, dormant through the winter. Once we do the removal, if there's any larvae in the tree, for the smaller trees, they all go through the chipper. So essentially it pulverizes the wood to wood chips. And for the larger pieces that are taken away as logs, there is a possibility that the larvae is still there and still active. However, if the tree is in significant decline, once the adult emerald ash borer emerges from the trunk, it's going to another host, right? It's going to the host that is still viable. So there is a potential that hence the quarantine area, that the wood needs to stay within the quarantine zone.
We take all the wood that we remove to a certain place in the city? Is that what we do?
Through the chair, the contractor that is working for us is responsible for the removals and the disposal of the material. We do work with them for locations for wood chipping. Essentially, there's 2 options for that wood. One is to actually take the wood chips and then further pulverize it to make a mulch, which is then sold as an organic mulch. The other option is to have it reduced down to firewood pieces, which would then be burnt.
And do residents have a choice of the tree they're going to get replaced? You showed us 6 or 8 different trees that might be on somebody's front lawn. Do they have a choice? Do you give them a list and say, what do you want? Or do you just put a tree on their property?
Through the chair, we'll make a first recommendation for the location and back to the issue, is it the right tree in the right spot? We will usually come up with 2 alternatives. So the resident can look at the preferred recommendation as well as the alternatives. They may have a preference, and certainly we have in the past engaged in discussions with them. If they are really set on a different tree, we'll have that dialogue with them. But ideally, for efficiency of the program, yes, we are making recommendations as we go forward, so the resident has an opportunity to choose from a short list.
Last question through the chair. It just went out of my mind. I guess it wasn't that important because I can't remember what I was going to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, Steve, how long in time, if it's usual, would it take for the tree to go from detection to mortality? Like, once we know a tree is infested, how long does it take to actually die?
Through the chair, so I'm going to give my best estimate here. I'm not a scientist.
I'm going to write it down. Just kidding.
We have seen, so it's tough to see if the tree is actually infested unless we do branch sampling and actually actively check the tree. If the tree is showing no signs, chances are it's 1 to 2 years, depending on the size of the tree and how heavy the infestation is before it will start to show signs of decline. The decline is the tricky part because it occurs at different rates depending on the degree of infestation. So some trees can decline over a couple of years. Some trees can decline very rapidly. It depends, I guess, so to give you an idea, from the tree being infested with the larva to actual final decline, you could be looking at a 4 to 5 year process, but that's not an exact science. There's quite a few factors there.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, it wouldn't be reasonable to be planting a tree. You can't plant it on top of the stump anyway, but would it be reasonable to plant trees near some of these ash trees especially that are on our boulevards and on our property, on the road allowance, so that when we do take that tree down, there's a little more mature tree there?
Yes, through the chair, that is a great suggestion. We have been doing that in the park areas where we know we're going to lose the canopy. We've gone in and done planting where there's a lot more space. And I can give you an example of Tapleytown Park is one that pops to mind, where we actually mirrored the sort of the park boundary planting with new tree plantings well in advance of the removals. So that strategy is something that we're actively looking at.
And through you, Mr. Chair, Steve, when a private homeowner has a private tree that's died, and they have someone come in, whether it's our contractor or someone else, what do they do with that wood? Like, how do they know what to do with it? And it sort of goes back to what Councillor Whitehead was saying, but it occurs to me that if you knew somebody who took down trees and you had them come in and they cut up that wood for you, how do you know where to get rid of it?
Yes, through the chair. So we will increase our communication on the importance of keeping the wood within the regulated area. Most of the contractors that do work as part of the quote offer that as part of the service to actually do the wood removal, and then it's the contractor's responsibility to dispose of that wood. But if the homeowner chose to ask that the wood be left on site, again, we can stress the importance of keeping it within the quarantine area.
So just to clarify for me, if you don't mind, through Mr. Chair, so have you already told contractors within the city, like, would they have a reason, would they know that they have to be very cautious of that wood?
Yes, through the chair, our contract with Davey Tree, it specifically states that they are responsible to keep the wood within the control of the regulated area as set up by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Okay. I just have one more question, Mr. Chair. The stumping that is done for these ash borer trees, is that a different stream than the stumping that is done for trees that forestry takes down, just regular trees that are dying on public land, where we take them down in front of someone's house and then come back and stump out the stump? Is that a different stream, or is it all part and parcel of the same one?
Through the chair, no, they are different work programs. The contractor on the ash borer program is also responsible for the stump grinding and removal. So we don't, city staff aren't actually doing those removals unless there is a very unique circumstance. So it's two parallel programs that are running.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderbeek. We now have Councillor Whitehead for a third time.
Second, actually, but can I just two quick questions? One is I didn't understand or get the survival rate of trees being planted, because I'm seeing a lot of planted trees that aren't surviving. So, what is the rate of survival of our planted trees?
Through the chair, we had higher than expected mortality from the 2 severe winters. So we actually saw trees that had been in the ground for a few years actually fail. And that again was both this winter and more so last winter, very extreme conditions. We do have a replacement program to go back and replace any trees that have failed, but we don't anticipate any abnormal mortality rate other than trees lost due to essentially not being watered.
So does the mortality rate impact the city in any way in regards to our capacity to maintain the numbers we want to get out on an annualized basis?
Through the chair. So we've increased our planting strategy for that specific reason. We have been catching up on the replacements, and that a lot of that activity was going on over the last couple of years, specifically last year. But we do have one of the highest orders this year of tree purchases, 8,200 trees, to actually get caught up to date.
So can I get the number then, the actual trees planted and what the survival rate is? Is it 30%, 40% in the last 2 years? If you got a number, that'd be helpful. You don't have to give it to me now. And the other question I have is that right now Canada Post is, in fact, I just got another email putting super mailboxes within drip lines of our healthy trees, not our ash trees. Is there concern from forestry when they're digging holes into the drip line to put cement pads?
Through the chair, no, we definitely don't encourage any activity within the drip line. We do actually go out on construction projects like that, and we'll do review with the project manager. I'd have to sort of look at the specific instance, but as a general rule, we discourage any activity.
So, and otherwise, if they're contractors putting super mailboxes on drip lines of our urban forest on the right-of-ways, there is a concern from forestry. Is that correct?
Through the chair, if there are significant works of excavation within the drip line, that it is a concern to forestry.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor DeVault.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just picking up on that, Steve, how would forestry know where if the drip lines are being ruined by excavation of Canada Post mailboxes when we don't even know where the Canada Post mailboxes are going? We have no record. They're unilaterally going in there, and we catch them by surprise.
Through the chair, I'm going to have to defer. I'm sort of at a loss to answer that one. I don't know if there's any.
Does anyone want to answer? Perhaps because, to be fair to staff, they were prepared for these questions, and it's kind of outside of the parameters of the presentation. Perhaps if we could have a notice to have that answered, and perhaps even through email.
Sure, and I thank you for that, Mr. Chair. So, Steve, trying not to put you on the spot or anything, maybe that should be investigated and maybe we could come back to this committee or just email the committee of how we're handling that type of situation.
Yep. All right, thank you. And no further speakers. May I have a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Collins, seconded by Whitehead. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, sir. Moving on now, 8.1. Councillor Collins, do you want to speak on this? Councillor Jackson's next.
Mr. Chairman, just through to...
Oh, no, Councillor Collins first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just through to staff, whoever wants to add, Adrian, who was the author, or whoever wants to answer it, please, manager, director. I'm just curious, on page 5, total of 137 bookings. So for the food trucks in the various parks that were approved last year, just curious, is that the uptake that staff were expecting? Is that lower than the amount staff were expecting? Higher than? Just, Mr. Chairman, just through you to Rob Norman, please. Director Rob.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, as this was directed as a pilot program, we weren't quite sure what to expect. We did meet with the food truck operators afterwards. We have received some suggestions for moving forward for phase 2 of the program.
Okay, Rob, that's great. And again, definitely where there's special events going on, it's your day at Gage Park, Festival of Friends, this is not conflicting with those dates at all, correct, Mr. Chairman, through you to Rob?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We do coordinate with the SEAT program to ensure there's no conflict. The food truck operators can approach these groups that are organized through SEAT to see if they would like it, but if it is not agreed to, then no, the SEAT program protects those programs.
Thanks, Rob. I'm satisfied with those. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. May I have a motion then to receive 8.1, moved by Collins, seconded by Connolly. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 8.2, Tim Hortons Field user fees. Councillor Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks for recognizing me first, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, through you to Ward, who authored the report, or again through the director, I just want to make sure that there's no conflict in moving forward on the bookings. Ward, nice to see you. Moving forward on the bookings in the future between the Cats and the city, the ward councillor, community groups. Mr. Chairman, through you to Ward, please, for a comment.
Through the chair. Absolutely not. We have a defined direction through the license agreement with the Hamilton Tiger Cats on the booking procedure, and we're clear on that. I have met with the Ward 3 councillor as well and walked through that procedure with them. We will be taking, as you notice in the marketing plans, communication out to our potential clients on the procedure as well.
Okay, Ward. And Ward, you could appreciate, I mean, when we, the majority of us, by slim majority, approved of the new lease deal with the Tiger Cats, with all the naming rights, Mr. Chairman, we were getting the lease deal. I think it amounted to, between naming and lease, about $1.2 million a year. I think about a 10 to 20 year contract. But part of that was the Cats having some leeway about bookings and that, and then we've run into recent some contentiousness or expectations from the community groups, etc. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure moving forward we don't have those kind of conversations, and they can be avoided in the future. What I'm hearing from you and this all players team that you've got set up, everybody's at the table, Mr. Chairman, through you to Ward, just to confirm that.
Through the chair, that's correct. We subsequently from this spring, we have had that conversation reiterated that the process to book the stadium comes through the city, and the Tiger Cats are aware of that. They follow the same regulations further to their agreement. They follow the same regulations and book through myself.
Thank you, Ward. Mr. Chairman, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Whitehead.
Page 2 of 4. Just two quick questions. One, film shoots, negotiable. And yet you're setting rates for everything else, but film shoots, negotiable. Is there not set fees for full stadium? I mean, photography, if I go right below it, $400 per hour or minimum, and it's a minimum of 4 hours, so the minimum charge is $1,600.
Through the chair, we met with our Hamilton Film and Music Office, and the variable rates of film shoots depend on the type of production that are there, and it's really trying to find that balance between time of year and what we can generate from a client.
Okay, so I guess a bit confusing because you would have the same problem with photography. Photography could be fall, winter, summer, whatever season. So it could be high season, low season, and yet you got a set rate identified here. So you don't identify different rates for different seasons.
Not with photography. Again, it's much more of a limited in revenue opportunity than what we're talking about with film. And film has, further to that, film has dynamics regarding setup, length of shoot that you wouldn't have with photography. Therefore, with photography very clean and use a standard rate for that.
Okay, so I guess the challenge I'm having, and you got anywhere we got negotiable, I don't know what the parameters in the matrix to decide what that range is. So to me, one day you can give the film, they use the same block of time, same season, say $1,000, and then the next year somebody else comes in and gives it for $500 because there's no standard. So help me understand what the matrix is to work from, and how you decide the rent that you're going to bring in through film shoots.
Through the chair, that would be working with our Hamilton Film and Music Office and their knowledge of the industry and what we could obtain for those. Okay.
Perhaps if I could interject for a moment, is there any way of perhaps ensuring that we have a minimum standard and then negotiable from there if in the event there are other factors contributing to the outcome?
Absolutely. One of the things is the Hamilton Film and Music Office are setting standards for the city in a report, and I can be part of that.
Okay, so Mr. Whitehead, Councilor Whitehead, if I could you have that prepared for council and distributed to committee members prior? What that minimum would be?
The direction that we've got is that they would have that report coming this fall, and we wanted to have them take the lead on that.
Okay, I appreciate actually minimum. I mean, sometimes you have ranges, so it could go from a minimum to potentially a maximum or open. Mm-hmm. So either way, I'd be more comfortable having actual something there than just this blank check where we don't have any idea, and it's at the discretion of one or two individuals, and there's no accountability in that process.
So I guess the concern is negotiable could mean zero. We're just so I think, and it's a valid point. So in essence, what we're trying to do is establish a minimum.
And that is, through the chair, that is our intent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on, we have no further speakers. So on the item, moved by Connolly, seconded by Vanderbeek, all in favor? Carried. Moving to 8.3. We have Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So, through you to Steve and/or Director Craig, is this the revised tree removal bylaw, Mr. Chairman,
yes,
that I've been talking?
Yes.
It is.
The email
okay.
Staff about, yes.
All right. So, Craig or Steve then, please, Director Murdoch, last term, I brought a number of motions I had to bring because of the restrictive nature of the bylaw. Let me just set the context quickly, Mr. Chairman, where I had homeowners that had a public tree, a city tree on the public portion of their property, and the tree was deemed healthy, tree was not deemed a liability, but the homeowners, most of them elderly, just simply could not cope with the amount of hardship, anxiety the tree caused. The ice storm revealed a lot, Mr. Chairman, a year and a half ago, where homeowners said to me, Tom, I forewarned the city that those branches were weak, etc., and sure enough, the tree is felled during the ice storm, could have been preventable, caused damage, hydro wires, whatever. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't the only one, but I brought a number of motions that I had to do politically on behalf of my constituents to get the tree removed. I thought there was 7-8 years ago, an amendment that I'd moved, somehow got lost, fair enough, where it allowed some discretion and latitude for the manager of forestry, i.e. Steve Barnhart, and or the director, Craig Murdoch, to allow for discretion where in situations like that they could review and determine themselves without a motion to committee and council. Mr. Chairman, through you to Steve or Craig, is that in place here? And what page, please, of the appendix? Mr. Chairman, through you.
Let's say Craig.
Through the chair, the policies set out in this bylaw do give the director the flexibility to work with you as you've just outlined. So it allows us to take down trees that may still be healthy. It allows us to take down trees that are along the property line that may be a little over 50% one way or the other. The part of the bylaw, it references the policies, and the policies are being developed still by legal services and ourselves, but it definitely has that flexibility built in.
Craig, you could appreciate why once bitten, twice shy, that I thought it was in place 7, 8 years ago. And so I just want to make sure for the public record for our legislative assistant, it is definitely in there. And I'm very pleased to hear that. And again, where the latitude still doesn't allow you to say on balance, I can authorize removal based on the hardship, whatever the constituent, still understood the political process might end up having to be the only way to go. But at least now you've got that intermediary step. Mr. Chairman, also, throughout Appendix A, Craig, like at the bottom of Appendix A, it says there, city can just walk in and remove a tree without notice to the homeowner upon where the land's located. I see that kind of language again on page 6 of Appendix A, paragraph 12. City can walk in, dangerous tree, and without notice to the homeowner of the land, just take the tree away. I'm not feeling good about the language of without notice. So, Mr. Chairman, through you to Craig, maybe explain why that language is in there, please. Craig?
Through the chair, the purpose of that language is for the in the event of public safety or emergencies. So that gives us that latitude that we could go in without notice. However, as you know, it's not our practice. We try to work with residents. If we are going in for trimming or any kind of proactive work, we do work with the homeowners. We let them know that the tree potentially is coming down or that we are trimming it and why. But if we do have an emergency situation, we do need the ability to go in without notice.
Okay, Craig, I'm satisfied with that explanation. And lastly, this revised policy, this covers urban landscape and rural landscape across our city. Mr. Chairman, through you to Craig.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate new manager Barnhart and Director Murdoch. They've sat with me a number of times since last term of council, and I appreciate now the flexibility they've allowed. Again, they're in the business of protecting, preserving, and conserving. I get that, but I just felt there wasn't enough leeway on individual circumstances, and now there will be. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor DeVaul.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. And it certainly is, I know will be put to test immediately, Mr. Barnhart, with one of my residents that I have that we've been talking about. But what I have problems with to this committee is when I look at the 50% rule, and I'm not sure how we got there, way before my time, but if the city planted a tree, my understanding is if the tree grows, we prune it, we cut it, and then all of a sudden the tree gets older and older. 54% is now on the private portion of the property. And if something happens to the tree where it has to be removed, the city then says to the homeowner, yes, we cut it all those years, but unfortunately it's over 50%, it's now yours. You get rid of it. How flexible are we with this 50-50 rule, or are we firm on it? Because I understand there's no record. When I've asked in previous investigations, is this a city tree? We don't know. There's no record of it. I looked down on Limeridge between Upper Sherman going east. We have a row of townhouses in there. Trees are beautifully lined up, and apparently not one of them is a city tree. And none of the owners that they lived there originally said it's their tree, that the city put it there. Have record, and we're saying it's the homeowner. So how flexible are we with this 50-50 rule?
Who would like to, Craig?
Through the chair, the new bylaw does give us the flexibility to work on property line issues where a tree is one way or the other greater than 50%. In the instances of the lack of records of who planted trees in the past, in a lot of cases, builders planted trees. And even though they were required to put them on the city road allowance, sometimes they didn't, and they put them on the residential portion. But this bylaw does give us the flexibility that's been requested.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate that. And one other question is, when the tree becomes a nuisance, the tree is healthy, the tree is aged, but now becomes a burden on the residential driveway, sidewalk. It's making all kinds of droppings from the seeds. And the homeowner is constantly cleaning up that area so people won't slip. But when they ask to remove the tree and maybe put another tree in, our line is, we can't do it. not allowed to do it under the bylaw, even though it's a nuisance. We're sorry, just keep up going. But the residents are now older. They cannot handle that type of work anymore. But we still expect them to keep their areas clean and their grass, the maintenance of their lawn, and it's ruining their cars. What do we do in that circumstance?
Through the chair, this new bylaw does give us the flexibility for removals for extenuating circumstances.
My ears, Greg. Thanks for your comment. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Duval. Councillor Conley.
Thank you. How do we handle trees that the roots are pushing up the sidewalk, for instance? And now we got a hazard with 2 or 3 inches of sidewalk difference, and it's a tree that's on the public land. How do we deal with that? Steve? Through the chair.
Through the chair, forestry would certainly take the lead in that investigation. When those locations become aware to us, we'll go out and review, and there's a couple of options depending on if it's simply sidewalk repair or if it does require some root pruning. We also have to look at the age of the tree. Is it the right tree for the right location, as previously mentioned? So each site is investigated individually for options.
And what are the options for the sidewalk? You just say, yep, it's an old tree. Sidewalk's going to be, I got a situation right now where it's at least 3 inches high. The sidewalk's been pushed up, about 3 sidewalk slabs long. It's a beautiful tree. I'm just if somebody trips on that or has an accident, which I did have, well, it wasn't because of the tree, but somebody tripped on a raised sidewalk the other week. Had to go to the hospital. But besides that, well, what's the next step? Looked at it. So, do we replace the sidewalk? Do we put that?
Steve?
So through the chair, no, we don't leave it. Once those locations have been made aware to us, we will investigate. The prime priority obviously is to get the sidewalk into a safe condition. Operations will work with us. We have to determine whether or not it's simply a repair where minor root pruning can be an option, or if it in fact is more significant than that, where the tree is not to pick on the silver maple, but they tend to get quite large, and if the tree has gotten to a point where it's the wrong tree for that location, then it may require a removal.
So the process would be to call you investigate it, and then get back to me if it was me. Is that right?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct.
And then it goes on a list that's 500 sidewalks long and gets done in 10 years. Is that the way we do it, or what?
Approximately.
No. Through you, Mr. Chair. Any of the trip and fall hazards like that are dealt with fairly quickly. I don't know whether, I guess Betty's not here, but I believe there's a very short duration for those types of hazards to be dealt with. So if you know of any of those, forward them. If they're tree related, Steve will forward that on to Betty, and they'll coordinate that. If it's, long stretches of small cracks and, old sidewalk, that's a different story.
Thank you, Councillor Conley. Okay, so moving on now on item, Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to that question and comment, so does forestry coordinate with our contacts with regards to sidewalks? So if it does come to, like I send my things to Paul McShane and sidewalks, and the tree is the issue, it goes to forestry? Great, I just want to be sure of that. And if I can just mention, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to make sure, because there was a question on the other, on the Emerald Ash Board, the presentation drip line was discussed. So in this bylaw, it does say that there are prohibitions with regards to placing items that may impede the free passage of water, air, or nutrients to the roots of a public tree, performing any work within the drip line of the tree protection zone. So I'm assuming that this bylaw will be used and can be used against Canada Post if this is an issue that they're putting any of their units in the areas of these trees. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Lisa?
Yes, it's certainly
Good.
amongst the sites that are being looked at very carefully in preparation of the application.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Pearson. So on item 8.3, may I have a motion? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. On 8.4, Councillor Duval, are you interested?
Yeah, I want to thank our staff for doing this investigation. It meant a lot to the residents up at 395. I agree with them. I agree with this report. It doesn't make sense to, because just the way it's established on just making a no right turn on a red. I expect to be back probably at the end of the year because I know the configuration of this is supposed to be changed when we're going to have pedestrian crosswalks on both sides, on the east side and the west side. The actual Mall Road is supposed to go right through the 395 to allow the people to park there. So,
okay.
But I appreciate all the work, and I will be sending this report to the residents of 395.
Okay, so moved by Duval, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Now moving on to motions, we have Councillor Collins. You have a motion to waive the rules.
First, I have a notice of motion to put. It's on behalf of Councillor Farr, and I'll read it out and then submit it to the clerk. It's notice of motion. So just, all right. Well, no, but both of them are notices of motion. So it would read that whereas the houses at numbers 379, 383, 385, and 389 Hess Street South are currently serviced by a sewer system that is over 100 years old, and whereas much of the sewer is located in the rear yard portion of private property in close proximity or under existing structures, and whereas Hess Street South from Aberdeen to the south end is currently undergoing reconstruction and the installation of new sewers, therefore be it resolved that A, the homeowners at numbers 379, 383, 385, and 389 each be provided a sewer lateral connection to the new sewer fronting their residences through the current construction contract. B, that the homeowners directly undertake the work to realign their sewer outlets from the rear yards to the front. C, that 3 quotes be obtained by the homeowners for this work. And D, that the homeowners be compensated by the City of Hamilton for the cost of this work through the Ward 2 Capital Reserve. That's a notice of motion. I believe Councillor Farr will be here when we speak to it at our next meeting. Okay. And the other one is the next one I have, Mr. Chairman, is 2 tree removals, so timely subject for today. I would move to waive the rules to introduce these as
Second by Whitehead. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you. And one is that the Norway maple tree on the road allowance of 19 Vienna Street, Monty side of the property, be removed. And number 2, that the city tree located at 258 Graham Avenue South be removed.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on, we have a motion on 11.1 A and B respecting changes to the outstanding business list. And that's moved by Whitehead, seconded by Pasuda. All in favor? Oh, Councillor Duval.
You're talking about the outstanding business list?
That's correct.
Okay, just a question.
Sure.
On 11B, on the sidewalk construction near Brebeuf School. Can I ask why we're delaying this again? And this has been going on for a couple of years, how we're going to...
Because I'm not here in June and I want to be here.
All right.
Really, that's it. I'm off in 3 weeks in June, and which was the original time frame to bring that forward. That's the only...
Not much, it's been...
Yeah, we're coordinating with the development on that other school and all those sidewalks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pasuda.
Thank you, Chairman Marilla. Just wondering on 11A, and we have the Confederation Park boat ramp. Are we taking that off the outstanding business list, even though we just made a motion to receive it? We were going to work with
Who would like to speak? Gary? So on Confederation Park, we dealt with it today, and Councillor Collins referred it to staff for a report back to committee. So does that technically now have that item removed from the outstanding business list, or does it would remain there because of the forthcoming report, I presume?
If I can, Chair,
Madam Clerk.
It will remain on the OBL. It was just the report was coming forward, so there's the assumption that we deal with it. But I will
Thank
keep
you.
it on
Okay. So on the changes to the outstanding business list, moved by Whitehead, second by Pasuda. All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. You want to?
General information.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was a little bit late this morning. Canada Post on 641 Scenic, in preparation to put pads down, dug a hole and cut into a gas line and a water line. The gas company was called. They had to shut off the meter. Obviously, it was a dangerous situation. Again, this is another example, Mr. Chair, why regulating our right-of-ways to ensure that safety's utmost standards are upheld is important. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Now, on that point, though, I'm sure, Gary, are you aware of what occurred? You haven't heard it? No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's the first I've heard of that.
Okay, because if we could maybe have something sent out via email, it seems like a pretty serious incident when gas lines are being tapped into. So could we have something sent in writing just as an update?
We will look into it and try and find out the most information that we can.
All right, thank you, sir. And a motion to adjourn. Moved by Whitehead, second by Pasuta. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, everyone.